Step out of the vehicle. Now. I'm working. I didn't ask what you were doing. I gave you an order.
The body cam was recording everything. Every word, every command, every second of the confrontation. And Officer Ryan Mitchell had absolutely no idea that the man sitting in the dark sedan with camera equipment and a laptop wasn't a suspicious person loitering in a parking lot. He was a 15-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, conducting active surveillance on a white-collar crime suspect who'd been under investigation for 18 months. The man wasn't nervous. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't trying to explain himself. He was Special Agent Michael Reed, and he just watched his suspect walk out of the building, see the police lights, and immediately drive away in the opposite direction. 18 months of work, hundreds of hours of surveillance, a case worth $42 million in fraud. Gone because a local cop saw a black man in a parked car and decided to investigate. Before we dive into this absolutely insane story, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your country, your state, wherever you are. And if you've ever been stopped or questioned for doing absolutely nothing wrong, hit that subscribe button. This story gets even more intense. You don't want to miss what happens next. Michael Reed had been with the FBI for 15 years. He'd started as a field agent in the Chicago office, worked financial crimes, public corruption, and organized crime cases. He'd made dozens of arrests. He'd testified in federal court over 40 times. He'd received commendations from 3 different FBI directors. He was good at his job. He was meticulous. He was patient. And he understood that surveillance work required absolute discretion. That Tuesday afternoon, he was parked in a commercial parking lot in downtown Portland, Oregon. He'd been there since 9 o'clock in the morning. It was now 3:15. He was watching an office building across the street. Specifically, he was watching the third-floor office of Richard Morgan, a financial advisor who'd been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme for the past 6 years. Michael's case had started 18 months earlier when a whistleblower contacted the FBI. Since then, Michael and his team had been building evidence, bank records, email communications, witness interviews, financial analysis. They had everything they needed, everything except catching Richard Morgan in the act of meeting with his co-conspirators. Intelligence suggested Morgan met with 2 other men every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. These men helped Morgan move money, create false documentation, and recruit new investors. If Michael could photograph these men, identify them, and document the meeting, he could tie them all together. The case would be airtight. Michael was using a long-range camera mounted on a tripod in his passenger seat. His laptop was open, recording everything. He had authorization from the FBI field office. He had clearance to conduct surveillance in this location. He was parked legally. He wasn't breaking any laws. His car was an unmarked sedan, dark blue, tinted windows. It looked like any other car in the parking lot. That was the point. Surveillance required blending in. At 3:10, Michael saw Morgan enter the building. At 3:12, 2 men Michael didn't recognize entered behind him. This was it. This was the meeting. Michael started photographing. The camera clicked quietly. The laptop recorded timestamps. Then at 3:15, a patrol car pulled into the parking lot. Officer Ryan Mitchell was 29 years old with 4 years on the Portland Police Bureau. He was assigned to a downtown patrol district. His job was to monitor the area for suspicious activity, respond to calls, and maintain visibility. When Ryan saw the dark sedan with tinted windows parked in the corner of the lot, something triggered in his mind. The car had been there for hours. Someone was inside. There was equipment visible through the windshield. In Ryan's mind, this looked suspicious. He pulled up behind the sedan and activated his lights. Michael saw the lights in his rear view mirror. His stomach dropped. No, not now. Not during the meeting. He stayed in his car. He stayed focused on the building. Morgan and the 2 men were inside. The meeting was happening. Michael needed photographs. He needed documentation. He couldn't stop now. Ryan got out of his patrol car and walked up to the driver's window. He tapped on it. Michael lowered the window 2 inches, just enough to speak. "I'm working. You need to move along. Let me see your ID." "I can't do that right now. You need to leave." Ryan's hand moved to his service weapon. Step out of the vehicle now. Michael kept his eyes on the building on the third floor, windows on the office where Morgan was meeting. I'm working. I can't step out right now. I didn't ask if you could. I gave you an order. Step out. Officer, I'm on the job.
You need to walk away.
Who do you think you're talking to? Step out before I drag you out. Michael had no choice. He couldn't blow his cover. He couldn't reveal his identity without potentially compromising the entire operation. But Ryan was escalating. The patrol car's lights were flashing.
People were noticing.
And then Michael saw it through his camera's viewfinder. Morgan walking out of the building, looking at the patrol car with its flashing lights, looking directly at Michael's sedan. Morgan's face showed recognition, fear. He turned and walked quickly in the other direction. The two men followed him. All three got into separate cars and drove away. 18 months of work, gone. Michael turned to Ryan. His voice was ice cold. I'm Special Agent Michael Reed, FBI, and you just compromised a federal surveillance operation. Quick question for you watching. Can you believe what just happened? Type your reaction in the comments. Ryan stared at him. You're what? Michael reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out his FBI credentials, the badge, the identification card. He held them up to the window. Special Agent Michael Reed, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been conducting authorized surveillance on a federal fraud investigation. You just cost us 18 months of work and a $42 million case. Ryan's face went pale. I didn't know.
You didn't ask.
You saw a black man in a parked car and assumed criminal activity. You approached without checking with dispatch. You demanded I exit my vehicle during an active federal operation. You compromised a surveillance position, and now my suspect is gone. I was just what? Doing your job? Your job isn't to harass federal agents conducting lawful operations. Ryan looked at the camera equipment at the laptop at the FBI credentials. I thought you were suspicious. Suspicious? I'm parked legally in a public parking lot. I wasn't breaking any laws. You had no probable cause to approach me. No reasonable suspicion, nothing. You saw a black man and decided to investigate, and it cost the FBI a case we've been building for 18 months. Michael pulled out his phone. He called his supervisor at the FBI field office. Ma'am, this is Reed. We have a problem. Local PD just compromised the Morgan surveillance. He saw the patrol car and fled. Yes, ma'am. All three subjects left. I have partial photos, but nothing usable. I need you to contact Portland PD Command. We need an immediate meeting. He ended the call and looked at Ryan. You're going to wait here. My supervisor is calling your chief right now. We're going to have a conversation about federal law enforcement cooperation or the lack of it. Ryan stood frozen. His body cam had recorded everything. The approach, the demands, the escalation. Michael revealing his FBI credentials. All of it captured. A supervisor arrived 20 minutes later. Lieutenant Karen Foster. She'd received a call from the FBI field office. She knew this was serious. She walked up to Michael's car. Special Agent Reed. Michael held up his credentials. Yes, ma'am. I'm Lieutenant Foster. I apologize for this incident. Can you tell me what happened? Michael explained. The 18-month investigation, the surveillance operation, the meeting he'd been documenting. Ryan's approach, the compromised operation, the fled suspects. Lieutenant Foster listened. Her expression grew darker with each sentence. She turned to Ryan. Did you check with dispatch before approaching this vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Did you run the plates?
No, ma'am.
Did you have any indication of criminal activity? The car had been parked here for hours with someone inside. That's not a crime, Officer Mitchell. Did Special Agent Reed commit any violation? Silence. Did he?
No, ma'am.
Lieutenant Foster turned back to Michael. Special Agent Reed. The Portland Police Bureau will cooperate fully with any investigation into this incident. I'll personally ensure this is addressed. Do you think the officer should face consequences? Type IE or NO in the comments. Michael spent the next 3 hours at FBI headquarters writing reports. His supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Victoria Bennett, was furious. 18 months, Michael. 18 months of work. We were this close. I know. And he approached you. Why? Because you look suspicious. Because I'm black and sitting in a parked car. Victoria's jaw tightened. We're filing a formal complaint with Portland PD. We're also requesting DOJ review this under federal civil rights statutes. This wasn't just harassment. This was interference with a federal investigation. The FBI's formal complaint landed on the Portland police chief's desk the next morning. It was 7 pages long. It detailed the 18-month investigation, the surveillance operation, Officer Mitchell's approach without cause, the compromised operation, the fled suspects. It also included something else, a pattern. The FBI had reviewed records of interactions between Portland PD and federal law enforcement. Over the past 3 years, Officer Ryan Mitchell had stopped or questioned federal agents on 5 separate occasions. 5 times. All 5 agents were minorities. 3 were black, 1 was Hispanic, 1 was Asian. In each case, Ryan had approached without cause, demanded identification, questioned what they were doing. In 3 cases, he demanded they leave public spaces where they had every right to be. None of the 5 were doing anything illegal. All 5 were conducting legitimate federal law enforcement activities. 1 was a DEA agent watching a drug house. Ryan's approach caused the suspects to notice surveillance and alter their behavior. 1 was an ATF agent documenting a firearms trafficking location. Ryan's patrol car presence tipped off the suspects. 1 was a Secret Service agent conducting advanced work for a presidential visit. Ryan questioned why he was photographing buildings. The pattern was undeniable. Ryan saw federal agents, all minorities, conducting lawful activities and assumed they were suspicious, and his interventions had compromised multiple federal investigations. The internal affairs investigation was brutal. Captain Lisa Martinez conducted the review. She interviewed Ryan. She interviewed the 5 federal agents he'd stopped. She reviewed Bodycam footage from all 6 incidents. Her report was 49 pages long. Her conclusion: Officer Mitchell demonstrates a pattern of racial profiling that has not only violated civil rights, but has actively interfered with federal law enforcement operations. His actions have compromised investigations worth millions of dollars and have damaged the relationship between Portland PD and federal agencies. Her recommendation: immediate termination. Ryan was fired within 1 week of the FBI complaint. But the consequences didn't stop there. Michael filed a personal civil rights lawsuit, not for himself. He didn't care about the money, but he wanted accountability. He wanted a public record. He wanted to ensure this couldn't happen to other federal agents or civilians. The lawsuit alleged racial profiling, unlawful detention, and interference with federal operations. The city's attorneys looked at the evidence. Body cam footage showing Ryan approaching Michael without cause. FBI credentials proving Michael's identity. Documentation of the compromised investigation, the pattern of 5 previous incidents, a plaintiff who was a decorated FBI agent with impeccable credibility. They settled in 6 weeks, $280,000 plus mandatory reforms. The reforms included mandatory training on federal law enforcement cooperation, implementation of a policy requiring officers to check with dispatch before approaching vehicles in non-emergency situations, quarterly reviews of stops to identify racial profiling patterns, and creation of a federal liaison position to coordinate with FBI, DEA, ATF, and other federal agencies. The settlement also required something unprecedented. Portland PD had to publicly apologize to the FBI and issue a formal statement acknowledging that Officer Mitchell's actions compromised federal investigations. If you think this settlement was justified, type justice in the comments. The press conference was covered by every major news outlet in Oregon and many national outlets. FBI Special Agent in Charge Victoria Bennett stood at the podium. Over 18 months, Special Agent Michael Reed built a case against a criminal organization that defrauded investors of $42 million. On the day we were prepared to identify and arrest the final co-conspirators, a Portland police officer approached Agent Reed's surveillance position without cause, compromised the operation, and allowed the suspects to flee. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was part of a pattern of racial profiling that has compromised multiple federal investigations. She paused. Agent Reed is a decorated federal agent with 15 years of service. He wasn't breaking any laws. He wasn't acting suspiciously. He was doing his job, and he was stopped because of the color of his skin. The FBI expects better from our law enforcement partners. The public deserves better. The press conference went viral. The body cam footage was viewed 28 million times in the first month. People were outraged. A police officer compromising an FBI investigation. 18 months of work destroyed. $42 million in fraud going unpunished. All because a cop saw a black man in a parked car. The comment sections exploded. People shared stories of being stopped while doing normal activities, waiting in cars, walking in neighborhoods, taking photographs, living their lives. The hashtag FBI Wildlife started trending. Federal agents, current and retired, shared their own stories of being stopped and questioned by local police who didn't believe they were legitimate law enforcement. Law enforcement organizations had mixed reactions. Some condemned Ryan's actions. Others tried to defend him, but those defenses crumbled when the pattern of his previous conduct became public. This wasn't one mistake. This was 6 separate incidents of profiling federal agents. The Portland Police Bureau implemented all required reforms. They created the federal liaison position. They revised their training. They instituted the review process. Most importantly, they started actually addressing racial profiling instead of dismissing it. Ryan tried to find work after being fired. He applied to 23 police departments across Oregon and Washington. Every single one rejected him. The incident with Michael had been too high-profile. The pattern too damning. No department wanted the liability. He applied to private security companies. Most rejected him. He eventually found work as a night security guard at a warehouse, making $19 an hour. Everything he'd built in 4 years of law enforcement was gone. His wife left him 6 months after the firing. She couldn't handle the public attention, the viral video, the constant recognition when people saw his face. Late at night, working alone in an empty warehouse, Ryan would think about that day. He'd seen a black man in a parked car with camera equipment in a parking lot. That was it. That was all he'd seen. And he decided it was suspicious. He'd never thought to run the plates. Never thought to check with dispatch. Never thought that maybe, just maybe, there was a legitimate reason for someone to be sitting in a car with camera equipment during the day in a legal parking spot. He just assumed, and his assumption cost him everything. Michael continued his work at the FBI. The Morgan investigation eventually resulted in arrests, but it took 18 additional months. Morgan and his co-conspirators had gone into hiding after seeing the police lights. The FBI had to rebuild surveillance, re-establish their locations, and start over. When they finally arrested Morgan, he'd moved an additional $15 million out of the country. Money that would never be recovered. Money that had belonged to retirees, families, people who trusted Morgan with their savings. Michael testified at Morgan's trial. He explained the investigation, the surveillance the day it was compromised. The jury convicted Morgan of fraud, but the sentence was smaller than it should have been because the FBI couldn't prove the full scope of the conspiracy. The 2 men who'd met with Morgan that day were never identified. The evidence Michael would have captured was never obtained. At the FBI headquarters, Michael became a trainer. He taught courses on civil rights, profiling, and interagency cooperation. He told his story to hundreds of FBI agents. He explained what happened. He showed the body cam footage. He made sure every agent understood that this could happen to them. 2. The body cam footage became required viewing, not just at the FBI, but at police mize across the country. It showed what happens when assumptions override training. How racial profiling can compromise investigations, how one officer's bias can destroy months or years of work. Michael was invited to speak at the National Law Enforcement Conference. Over 3,000 police chiefs and sheriffs attended. He told his story, the surveillance operation, the approach, the compromised case, the pattern of profiling. "I've been an FBI agent for 15 years, he said. "I've worked alongside hundreds of local police officers. Most are professional. Most are dedicated, but it only takes one officer with unchecked bias to cause serious damage. I'm not just another citizen you can dismiss. I'm a federal agent with a badge and a gun and full authority. And I was still profiled. I was still stopped. If this can happen to me, imagine what's happening to civilians who don't have my credentials. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Michael never got his full case back. Morgan served 8 years instead of 20. The two co-conspirators were never arrested. $15 million was never recovered. Victims received only partial restitution, but Michael's story changed policies. Portland PD's reforms became a model. Other departments adopted similar federal liaison programs. Training curricula were updated. The relationship between local and federal law enforcement improved. 10 years later, Michael was promoted to supervisory special agent. He ran a squad of 12 agents. He taught at the FBI Academy. He mentored young agents. And every year on the anniversary of that day, he'd drive past that parking lot, the spot where he'd been conducting surveillance, where he'd been stopped for being black in a parked car, where 18 months of work had evaporated in 15 minutes. He'd think about the victims who never got full justice, the money they lost, the retirement savings that disappeared. All because one cop saw a black man and assumed criminal activity. The impact of Michael's case rippled through law enforcement for years. The FBI created a national database to track incidents where federal agents were stopped or questioned by local police. The goal was to identify patterns before they became problems. Within the first year, the database revealed shocking statistics. Over 100 federal agents reported being stopped by local police while conducting legitimate operations. 73 of those agents were minorities. The pattern wasn't isolated to Portland. It was national. The database also revealed something else. In 42 of those stops, the local police intervention had compromised active federal investigations. Drug cases, terrorism investigations, public corruption probes, financial crimes, all disrupted because local officers made assumptions about who looked suspicious. The FBI director issued a memorandum to all field offices. Any federal agent stopped by local police had to file a report. The FBI would track every incident, identify problematic departments, and address the issue through official channels. Portland PD became a case study. Other departments sent observers to learn from their reforms. The federal liaison position became a model that 63 other police departments adopted within 3 years. The liaison's job was to maintain constant communication with federal agencies operating in Portland. If the FBI was conducting surveillance, the liaison knew. If DEA was running an operation, the liaison knew. If ATF was tracking firearms, the liaison knew. And most importantly, patrol officers knew who to contact before approaching anyone who might be federal law enforcement. The system wasn't perfect, but it reduced incidents dramatically. In the 3 years before Michael's case, Portland PD had 28 documented interactions with federal agents that resulted in complaints. In the 3 years after, they had 2. Both were resolved quickly with apologies and no compromised investigations. Michael's body cam footage became legendary in law enforcement training. Every FBI Academy class watched it. Every federal law enforcement training center used it. It was shown at conferences, seminars, and workshops. The footage was powerful because it showed everything. Ryan's approach without cause. His demands, his escalation. Michael's calm professionalism. The reveal of FBI credentials. The realization of what had been lost. All captured in clear audio and video. Training instructors would pause the video at key moments. What should the officer have done here? They'd ask. What assumptions is he making? What evidence of criminal activity does he have? Why didn't he check with dispatch first? The answers were always the same. Ryan had no cause, no evidence, no justification, just assumptions based on race. The Morgan case haunted Michael for years. He'd been so close. The photographs he'd started taking showed Morgan entering the building, showed the 2 men following. If he'd had 10 more minutes, he would have captured them all together, would have documented the meeting, would have identified the co-conspirators. Instead, he had partial images, blurry shots of men walking, nothing usable in court. The FBI kept investigating. They tracked Morgan's money. They interviewed more victims. They found evidence of fraud dating back 11 years. Morgan had stolen from over 200 people. Retirees who trusted him with their pensions. Families who'd given him their children's college funds. Immigrants who'd saved for decades and believed Morgan would invest it safely. One victim was a 74-year-old woman named Margaret Wells, no relation to Richard Morgan. She'd been a teacher for 41 years. She'd saved $300,000 for retirement. She gave it all to Morgan to invest. He promised 12% returns. She received statements showing her account growing. None of it was real. When the FBI arrested Morgan, her money was gone. All of it. She went back to work at 74, taking a part-time job at a library to pay her rent. Michael met her during the investigation. She cried when she told him about her savings, about how she trusted Morgan, about how she'd worked her whole life and now had nothing. "We're going to get him," Michael promised. "We're going to make sure he goes to prison." And they did. But Margaret only got back 42 cents on the dollar. Morgan had moved too much money offshore. The FBI recovered what they could, but it wasn't enough. When Michael testified at Morgan's sentencing, he mentioned Margaret. "Your Honor, this case should have been airtight. We should have identified all co-conspirators. We should have tracked every dollar. But our investigation was compromised. The defendant saw police lights during our surveillance and fled. We had to start over." In those 18 months, he moved $15 million out of reach. That's $15 million that will never be returned to victims like Margaret Wells, a 74-year-old retired teacher who lost her entire life savings. The judge sentenced Morgan to 8 years. It should have been 20. The defense argued successfully that the prosecution couldn't prove the full scope of the conspiracy because key evidence was never obtained. Michael walked out of that courtroom feeling like he'd failed, not because of anything he'd done wrong, but because Ryan Mitchell's 15-minute intervention had cascading consequences that lasted years. Ryan's life after the firing was one of steady decline. The $19 an hour security job was mind-numbing. He'd patrol empty warehouses from midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning, seeing no one, doing nothing, watching cameras show empty hallways. He'd think about his 4 years as a police officer. The authority, the purpose, the feeling that he was protecting people. Now, he protected empty boxes in a warehouse. His ex-wife remarried 2 years after their divorce. His parents moved to Arizona and rarely called. His brother stopped inviting him to family gatherings after Ryan's viral video was played at Thanksgiving by a cousin who didn't know Ryan was there. The room went silent. Ryan left. He hadn't been invited back. He had no friends. His police officer friends had all moved on. They couldn't be associated with someone who'd compromised an FBI investigation. His civilian friends drifted away when he became toxic to be around, bitter and angry at the world. Dating was impossible. His face was too recognizable. Women would Google his name on the first date and never call back. One woman confronted him in a restaurant asking if he was the cop who ruined the FBI case. He left without eating. He tried therapy. The therapist asked him to examine his actions. "Why did you approach the vehicle?" "I don't know. It looked suspicious." "What was suspicious about it?" "A black man sitting in a car." "Did you hear yourself just say that?" The session ended early. Ryan never went back. Sometimes late at night in the empty warehouse, Ryan would watch the body cam footage on his phone. He'd put in earbuds so no one could hear. He'd watch himself walk up to Michael's car, watch himself tap on the window, watch the interaction escalate. The moment that haunted him most was when Michael said, "I'm Special Agent Michael Reed, FBI, and you just compromised a federal surveillance operation." The look on Michael's face, not anger, disappointment, exhaustion, like this had happened before and would happen again. And the moment when Michael showed his credentials, when Ryan realized what he'd done, his face on the body cam went pale. His mouth opened. No words came out. That moment was frozen forever on the internet. 28 million views. His stupidity captured in high definition. He'd made assumptions, saw a black man with camera equipment and assumed crime. Never considered legitimate reasons, never thought to check, just assumed. And that assumption destroyed his career, his marriage, his relationships, and his future. But worse, it destroyed an investigation that could have brought justice to 200 victims of fraud. Michael never watched the body cam footage for entertainment. He watched it for training. He'd break down every moment, show it to new FBI agents, explain the psychology of what happened. Officer Mitchell wasn't a bad person, Michael would tell classes. He wasn't actively malicious. He'd probably tell you he's not racist. But implicit bias is real. It's unconscious. It's shaped by media, by culture, by experience. And if you don't actively work to counter it, it will affect your decisions. He'd pause the video. Look at this moment. He sees my camera equipment.
He sees my laptop.
In his mind, this confirms suspicion. He's not thinking maybe this is a photographer, or maybe this is someone working legitimately. He's thinking suspicious person with surveillance equipment.
Why?
Because his initial assumption that I didn't belong there colored everything else he saw. The FBI agents would nod. They understood. Many had been stopped themselves. Black agents, Hispanic agents, Asian agents, all with stories of local police questioning their presence in places they had every right to be. Michael's training became mandatory for all new FBI agents. Every recruit had to attend a session on civil rights, profiling, and interagency cooperation. He'd tell his story, show the video, discuss the consequences. At the end of each session, he'd say the same thing. You're going to be federal agents. You have authority. You have credentials. You have the full power of the federal government behind you. And you will still be profiled. You will still be stopped. You will still be questioned. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because some officers will look at your face and make assumptions. When that happens, stay calm, document it, report it, and know that you're not alone. The applause was always sustained. Agents appreciated his honesty, his vulnerability, his willingness to share a painful experience to help others. 10 years after the incident, Michael was promoted to Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Portland field office. He oversaw multiple squads. He managed major investigations. He represented the FBI at community events. He'd achieved everything he'd worked for in his career. But he still thought about that parking lot, about Morgan walking out of the building, about the suspects who were never identified, about Margaret Wells, and the other victims who never got full justice. On the 10-year anniversary, the Portland police chief invited Michael to speak at the annual department meeting. Over 800 Portland police officers attended. Michael stood at the podium. 10 years ago, I was sitting in that parking lot conducting surveillance. Officer Ryan Mitchell approached my vehicle and demanded I step out. I told him I was working. He escalated. I had no choice but to reveal my identity as an FBI agent. By then, my surveillance target had seen the police lights and fled. The room was silent. Officer Mitchell was fired. He lost everything. And I don't celebrate that. I don't take pleasure in his suffering, but his actions had consequences beyond his own life. He compromised an investigation that affected 200 victims. He established a pattern that damaged trust between federal and local law enforcement. He made assumptions that cost real people real justice. He paused. I'm not here to shame Ryan Mitchell. I'm here to ask all of you to examine your own assumptions. When you see someone in a parked car, what do you think? When you see someone in a neighborhood, what do you assume? When you approach someone, are you basing it on behavior or appearance? More silence. You're police officers. You have difficult jobs. You make split-second decisions, but those decisions have consequences. Not just for you, not just for the person you're stopping, but for everyone connected to that moment. Every witness, every victim, every investigation, every family. Your assumptions matter. Your bias, acknowledge or not, affects real people's lives. He looked around the room. The Portland Police Bureau has made real progress. Your reforms work. Your federal liaison program is a national model, but the work isn't done. Bias doesn't disappear because you take a training class. It's constant. It's daily. It requires vigilance. The standing ovation lasted 6 minutes. Officers lined up afterward to shake Michael's hand to thank him, to share their own stories of learning and growth. Michael Reed, 42 when he was stopped during surveillance. 52 now, still fighting, still teaching, still working to ensure no other federal agent, no other civilian has to experience what he experienced. His story changed policies, changed training, changed relationships, changed lives, all captured on body cam footage that will be watched by law enforcement officers for generations to come. One Tuesday afternoon, 15 minutes, a police officer who compromised an FBI investigation and a special agent who made sure it never happened again. If this story made you think about the assumptions law enforcement makes every day, share it. Hit subscribe for more stories about accountability and justice. Drop a comment. Have you ever been stopped or questioned while doing absolutely nothing wrong? Tell your story. See you in the next one.